Karen in the book of Matthew.
Today's scripture reading comes from Matthew chapter 22, verse 34 to 40. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in law, tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second is like this: love your neighbors as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. This is the word of God.
Thanks, Karen. It seems like I threw you off with no podium here, but yeah, you don't have to hide. That's the beauty of it. Thank you for that reading. So I promise I'm not going to talk for very long, but I thought it important to kind of set the sort of theological reason behind why we're spending a whole Sunday highlighting what God's doing here, particularly in Villa Park and in DuPage County through our friends. So I promise the floor is going to be y'all's in a minute, but pastorly obligations, right? So we saw in this passage that Karen read, and I'm sure it's one that's familiar to some of us who've been going to church for any amount of time. And in it, we see that Jesus summarizes the Jewish law in two commandments, right? Love God with your entire being and love your neighbors as yourself. Now, it's important to recognize right off the bat that it is impossible for us to love God with our whole selves and to love our neighbors as ourselves all on our own. We can't do it. We're not meant to do it on our own because we simply do not have the strength to love that consistently. None of us is, let's face it, none of us is good enough, right? As Christians, our belief and our experience as human beings tells us that apart from God's grace and God's love, loving to this degree with any amount of consistency is simply beyond our reach. But of course, Christianity is about the good news, right? The gospel of Jesus Christ. We believe that Jesus Christ lived the life that we could not in order to justify us before God and create the path for us to walk the way of righteousness that God had originally intended for all of humanity. It's God's great love for us that motivates all of this. It's God's great love that makes it possible for us who have given our lives and allegiance to Jesus, to love as completely as Jesus describes in Matthew chapter 22. The Holy Spirit of God dwells in our hearts as Christians and now gives us the capacity to love God with our entire beings, to be able to actually do that, to truly love our neighbors as ourselves. By now, you might be wondering how all of this relates to the importance of serving our community or why this busy group of people has been invited only to have to listen to me. But it's because of this. The same God who wooed us with his love in Jesus and gives us the capacity to choose to love God with all of our being is the same God who invites us to partner with him in loving our neighbors as ourselves. You tracking? Does that make sense? Right? The same God who proactively sought out the people who willingly strayed away from him has been proactively at work in the world, restoring, renewing, and bringing his holistic peace, or what the Bible calls shalom, back into the world that sin had fractured. And because we believe that God is actively at work in the world, in our country, in DuPage County, and in Villa Park, we seek to join God in what he is doing. It's the same mindset and posture that I'm certain that Grace, Tip, and Patrick have while serving God in Thailand and around around the world. They're joining God as he spreads his shalom in Africa, in Asia, in Europe. It's the same God is active here as well as on the other side of the world. And that should be an assurance to us. That should be encouraging. And his invitation is simply this: is for us to join him in what he is already doing. So this morning we have very clear embodied evidence of God's work in DuPage County in these 4 women who've joined us this morning. Our panelists have personally logged many years, not too many years, but many years, loving and serving our neighbors and spreading God's shalom through their service, through their organizations. The organizations that they represent, I believe, have been agents of spreading God's shalom. So really, we are honored this morning to spend a little bit of time with them. And we're proud to be counted among their friends and their partners in loving and serving our neighbors. We have a lot to learn from them. So please give them your full attention. I know it's hot in here. It's a little warm in here, but let's try our best. If you need to stand up, that's all right. Do what you need to do to be able to pay attention. And I'll also say this. As we're listening, be open to what the Holy Spirit might be sharing with you. Tune into God's voice about not only what these organizations are doing, how God's moving, but also how you and our church can join them in the work that God is doing here in Villa Park and in DuPage County. We're also going to have some time for questions at the end, so make sure you're thinking about those as well. So we can ask some good questions. Yeah. All right, are we excited? I'm really excited. I'm really grateful that they're all here. Can we, I'm going to turn the mic over to Aaron, but can we just warmly welcome our panelists this morning?
Good morning, Christ Covenant Church. As the focus has been, this is our Outreach Sunday welcome. I'm so glad that you can all join us today. I'm pleased to welcome our participants for our panel discussion. As Pastor Juan had mentioned, we have been serving with them in different capacities, from our back to school backpack giveaway. We've done fundraisers. We are partnering with DUCAP, and we're doing a new Sunday afternoon tutoring program. So we're really going to learn about these community partners, how they're serving, and how we have served with them in the past. And I'm really excited to kind of dive into this and get to learn a little bit more about each one of these organizations. How this is going to work, I'm going to give an introduction for each participant. They're going to come up and tell us about our organization, and then we're going to jump right into a discussion. And as Pastor Juan had mentioned, we will have some time for questions. So I invite you all to sit and listen and think about things that you could ask some of the participants if you had questions about how we're serving together, how they serve the community. Try to be thinking of ways that you can engage with them, because this is a great opportunity to do so. Our first guest is Yesenia Dodenhoff. She is a bilingual case manager for Outreach York. We have worked with Outreach York in the past. They were part of the Early Childhood Collaborative, which we have recently joined, and they were here for our vaccine clinic. So that was the first time we got to work with them, and it was really exciting and encouraging to be part of something so big and something that could really impact our community in a tangible way. So please warmly welcome Yesenia.
Hello? Can you all hear me? Okay, thank you. I'll stand up so I don't feel that nervous. This is intimidating. So again, my name is Yesenia Dodenhoff, and I'm going to speak a little bit about me first, so you understand where I'm coming from. So I'm originally from Costa Rica, from the north side of Costa Rica, like the island. And my mother, actually, she was Catholic. And In this small neighborhood that I grew up, there was no church, no stores, nothing. It was just houses and a beautiful river. And a group of pastors from the United States came to evangelize my neighborhood. And I will say that's the first time that I remember listening to the Word of God. So it was beautiful. Later on, I moved to the city and graduated from a bachelor's degree in social work. And then I got my licenciatura, which is another degree, doesn't exist in the United States, in social work. Then I met my husband, an American. And at the end of 1999, I moved to the United States. This has taken me, this adventure, to different parts of the world with my husband. He's in business, and I've been in Ireland, in Australia, different parts of the United States, and finally ended up in here. I have two beautiful daughters, 14 and 18. And as I say, teenagers, mom doesn't exist anymore. So I realized, okay, it's time to go back to work and retake my life. So that took me to Outreach. Interestingly, you know, it's an organization, that has a Christian background, and that caught my attention. I loved it. And so I applied for this position as a case manager, and I've been there for a year and 2 months now. So I'm quite new to understand all what this organization does, but I'm going to try to do my best. So there is a main office located in Carol Streams, which is Outreach, recently changed to Outreach only. It used to be Outreach Community Ministries. So if you heard about it, now it's Outreach. And we try to provide services to different areas. So I am in Outreach York, which covers Villa Park, though I received clients from, name it, in DuPage. Lombard, Villa Park, Oak Brook, Downers Grove, you name it. And we do not deny the services to anyone. As a case manager, what I do is provide services regarding any needs that a person has, from rental assistance to apply to any services that are provided through the government, and to provide advocacy to clients, to other organizations that perhaps will have the services that are looking for and that we at that time we don't have, as well as anything regarding food pantries, after-school programs, anything. So now in York, we do have an after-school program for families that have children and they need to work and perhaps they need to leave them somewhere. But it's not just an after-school care program. It's a program that is actually intending to help these children to overcome their struggles in school and help them to move on, not just with the education, but also with the language. A lot of them actually are either from the Middle East or Latino background, like Mexicans and some Cubans. So we have these services for them, and we don't do it alone. We also do it with the help of a lot of you guys will come and volunteer and help us, and which makes this organization rich and successful. So if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Yesenia. Can we give Yesenia a warm round of applause? Okay. And this is her slide from Outreach York. Be sure to check them out if you would like some more information. Our next guest is Michelle Smith. She is the Community Engagement Director. And with her is Michelle Gonzalez, and she is the Event Director from DuCap Villa Park. In 2023, DuCap donated a laptop for our back to school event where we provided free backpacks full of supplies for students in District 45. DuCap very generously provided a computer to give away at that event, and that was really, really cool. To further our partnership with DuCap, we are starting a tutoring program, and that's going to be on Sundays afternoon. We are hosting the tutoring here, so we're looking for volunteers, and that's going to be mostly our students are volunteering, but adults are allowed to volunteer with the students as well. And like I said, we will be on site with them, and they are also having a spot at the Villa Park Library that will offer tutoring. So if you could please warmly welcome Michelle.
Great. Thank you so much, you guys. We have some slides here for you to kind of bring some visuals to what we do here at DoCap. Let me see, on the first one, great. So what is DoCap? We often have people ask us. Actually came up in one of our trainings yesterday for a lot of our adult volunteers. What the heck does DoCap even stand for? And I don't have that on the slide, but for those who may be wondering, it stands for DuPage County Area Project, because when we had started back in the 90s, we first started in DuPage County. And since then, we have expanded to Will County and have the ability to go in other places. So we kind of don't usually use that tagline. We don't usually talk about what it actually stands for, because it really doesn't have much relevance. If we look at these slides up here, there's an awful lot of words. The first one talks about how what we do at DoCap is we partner with communities to assist teens and their families in an effort to improve, strengthen, and enhance community life. In doing so, DoCap serves as a support tool that uses external resources to strengthen neighborhoods. So that's really what we're all about. We're about coming into communities and making them stronger. And we know that when there are families in the community and adults in the community that want to help, and teens, you don't often all have the different skill sets needed to make all those things happen. Maybe you're really good in this one area, but not good in another area. Or maybe you need a little connection, like with the tutoring program. We were told we have lots of people who want to tutor, but we don't necessarily have the funds to pay for a staff person to be able to oversee that. Can DoCap help us in that area? And we were able to help in the area of paying for that part-time person to work with all of the volunteers. We were also able to help with the marketing materials and things like that. So we fill in those holes that are really needed so that a community can really on their own do what's needed in their community to make it better. So we're consultants. We work together to solve your community's unique wants and needs while really avoiding duplication of services. We have lots of relationships with different organizations throughout various towns, and we never want to do something that already exists. That's why when you can see all our different organizations here together, it's how do we work together? Because if there's something that these two organizations are doing, ours doesn't need to. Where's the hole? How can we fill that in? Because that way we can really strengthen and really stretch out God's resources that are there in a much better way. In the last part here, this slide says that we support and invest in the community so that the community can build and direct youth-driven initiatives. We really are all about teens because we realize that teens are our future. And when we say teens, we focus right now on 11 to 17, that middle school and high school age, but we actually go up to age 24 because we want to still work with them afterwards. And there's really that whole idea that one positive experience can turn a teen into a much different direction in their life. It just takes one positive experience. So how do we build a lot more positive experiences out there in the community? If I can get the next slide, thank you. So this is a great visual right here that shows how do we support, how do we invest? We consult, we train, we share our expertise. We assist with marketing and development. We invest by helping find funding, sponsors, donors, grants, basic costs, staffing. What does the community do on the other side over here? The community creates and builds opportunities, finds those opportunities like you guys did with the tutoring program, finds the staff, finds the volunteers, finds the funding. And then the community directs. It's the hands-on, boots on the ground. So you'll see Michelle and I in the initial couple weeks as we get the tutoring up and going, but at that point we kind of step away and it's you guys running with it. And as you need help, you bring us in for that. The community then directs initiatives and efforts and collaborates on initiatives. So, and this is the history that I mentioned just back in 1990. This concept of working in communities this way was happening in the Chicagoland area. They realized a need in DuPage and came over here in 1991. And then about 2006, we expanded into Will County. And where we go from here in 2024 is really up to all of our communities and how that's going to work. So this is just a nice visual, like how can people help support with DUCAP? Paul here, we're very blessed to have had Paul involved since the time we first came to Villa Park many years ago. He's the volunteer chair of our leadership group of adults here in the community and helps us with our teens too. So we're so blessed to have him. Blessed to have Hannah agreeing to start taking over the leadership of the tutoring program. And there's different ways that you can help. And I know from talking with Paul about the community here, a lot of you don't necessarily live locally here in Villa Park, correct? So there's ways that you can help us by not being here. Things like helping us with computer databases behind the scenes, helping with maybe making phone calls and outreach, helping with marketing and those different things. So there's lots of different talents and skills that you may be thinking, ooh, I really enjoy doing this. I'd like to do this, and I don't have to be in person to do that. So let's have conversations. That's where Michelle and I can kind of talk. Paul can connect you with us, and you can talk with Paul first, and we can expand that. But anything you're thinking, wow, I have this talent I really like to do. I'd love to share this skill that I have. We can get creative. So it's, whether it's spreading the word, volunteering and partnering, or helping us find other volunteers who are out there who may want to do something. Maybe it's not you, but you know someone else who wants to share and wants to inspire. And sponsoring and donating. Teens have great big ideas, and as you guys know, they're not cheap. So it costs a lot of money to carry their dreams further. So we're always looking for donations and support, whether that's in a little way or a big way. All of that makes a difference. So I think that's probably, and this is the slide that we're ending with on the homework, help, and tutoring. So that is us.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate that. That was so informative. And I am pleased to introduce our final panelist, Catherine Lynott, and she is the Executive Director of the Outreach House. We have partnered with the Outreach House in the past. We hosted the Fire and Ice Stock the Pantry events 2 years in a row to support the Outreach House. We've given them different kinds of donations, from food to personal care items. And more recently, we did our giving challenge for the Outreach House. So all of the proceeds of that will benefit the Outreach House. And please welcome Catherine Lynott.
Thank you, and so nice to come after the other two guests here. So the Outreach House, the reason for being is simple. It's to provide compassionate and effective assistance to our neighbours in our service area. Our service area currently is York Township. York Township is Lombard, Villa Park, Oakbrook Terrace, most of Elmhurst, and then a little bit of Glenellen, Westmont, and Downers Grove. And then just over a year ago, we also added the towns of Glendale Heights and Addison. So that's that piece. The next slide, please. So the programs that we have 4 programs. We have a food pantry, a clothes closet, an infant needs program called First Things First, and we also provide emergency assistance. All 4 programs started at 2 local churches in Lombard. So the food pantry and the clothes closet started at First United Methodist Church, and the other 2 programs, we can just stay right there, thank you. The other 2 programs started at First Church of Lombard. So all of the programs have been in our community for at least 20 years. The food pantry used to be called Lombard Villa Park Food Pantry, and that's been around for over 40 years. And we like to say that we're in our community, created by our community, serving our community. So pretty impressive. I'll wait for that strange noise to go past. Okay. So very much a community-based organization. As I said, serving our community with people from our community. And about 3 years ago, the boards of both churches as well as the different groups all came together and said, how can we provide these services more and the decision was made to bring the 4 programs under a 501c3 umbrella called the Outreach House. So instead of 4 individual programs, it then became one organization. And that's when I became involved. I became involved as executive director just about 2 years ago. My background is corporate legal services, so being a nonprofit is quite different. You'd think it's actually quite similar in many ways, managing a lot of people and all this stuff. So very excitingly, August 15th, just over a year ago, we moved all of the programs from their 4 different rooms in different churches to one building on Main Street in Lombard. Some really exciting impacts of that is obviously much easier for our guests to access all the services at one location instead of coming on different days and different times to different places. It's an ADA compliant building, which means our guests can and do come in their wheelchairs. Moms can bring their strollers. People who just have general mobility issues can make their way and access all the programs without any issues. So that's been a really big change. The next slide, please. Our 2 big focuses really are two of our big buzzwords are dignity and abundance. So we really strive to provide a facility that provides a dignified experience for our guests. And the firm belief of myself and of our board and of the people who support us is there's so much money, there's so much food, there's so much clothes out there, and our job is to get it and to give it to the people who need it. When we opened, you can see kind of some screenshots of our food pantry. And before we moved during the pandemic, people were driving up to First United Methodist Church and we were putting a box in their trunk. That has changed since we opened. We now have a store-like facility where people are offered their own shopping cart and they're invited to choose what their families need for that week. So it's self-selection for the most part, and for the most part, we don't have any limits on the items that people can choose. The first week we opened, I think one of the, well, we have the quote there. A little girl was holding her mom's hand and she walked through a store and she looked up at her mom and she says, "Mom, I like this store." And for us, it was just a real, I suppose, validation that what we were doing was right. And we just think that little girl going to school is going to be able to share a similar experience to the kids in her class. She went to a store, she got a shopping cart, she was able to choose foods, and we usually have some treats and books and other little things that she might be able to go home with and just be able to go to school and share that story with other kids instead of, I went to a parking lot and someone put some food in my trunk. So that's just a quote that stuck with us since we moved. If you could move to the next slide, please. So again, eliminating limits. During the pandemic, we just filled boxes and we put them in people's trunks, and people didn't have choice as to what was going in there, how much, how little, whether they liked it or they didn't like it. We have a big focus on healthy food, so we really strive to provide as much fresh produce as we can. We've been supported in the last year through the county board. They had a large grant that they gave to the Northern Illinois Food Bank that they're then using to give us excess produce. So we had a youngish gentleman in his 40s come, and when he was able to finish his shopping, this is the quote he gave us: "It's been one of the most significant changes I've encountered. I was eating ramen soup before I came here, getting free food wherever I could, but now I can actually eat healthy. It helps me live a healthy lifestyle." And this was a young man who'd never been to college. He didn't have a trade. He kind of works odd jobs, so during the winter, there's fewer odd jobs, and he struggles to make ends meet. But now he's able to come and get fresh food and choose what he wants on a weekly basis. So responding to our community, since we've moved, we have more than doubled the number of families we're serving every week. We just ran our numbers for last year, so we had 20,000 visits to our food pantry last year. We're now seeing at least 450 families a week. That's up from about 200 just over a year ago. We are now distributing about 18,000 diapers a month to our families. So last year we distributed 184,000 diapers to our community. The last year that we were in the basement of First United Methodist Church in the clothes closet, we distributed 204 winter coats. Last year, our first year, we distributed 700. This year, it's the second week in January, and we've already distributed over 1,200 winter coats. And my silly story is I came from Ireland 23 years ago with my Irish winter coat. My first winter in Chicago, realized it was not a Chicago winter coat. So we only count Chicago level winter coats. So that's what we try and ensure, that every single family member has a Chicago winter coat. And if we can move to the next, I've got some kind of numbers and slides. We can keep going to the next slide. So these are some of the numbers. Again, 2023, the estimate was 1 million pounds of food. We actually ran the numbers, and it's over 1.25 million pounds of food that we distributed last year. The numbers of coats, visits, diapers are all there. In terms of growth and kind of what we're seeing, I'm sure you've all seen the news about new immigrants just being dropped off at various locations, and literally they're being dropped off with nothing. So on one of the coldest days last year, we had to close with the snow, but we did open on the following Monday. We had literally people in line in flip-flops with no socks, no coats, people trying to tie blankets around them. And it's just so shocking when it's so cold outside. So for them, we don't count, we don't register, we just want to get them socks and shoes and coats and make sure that they're being taken care of. I think one of our challenges is that a lot of the new immigrants or asylum seekers do not have any identification, so they can't show that they live in our service area. We're not big enough yet just to open our doors to everybody who comes, so we do enforce. It's literally the only thing we need is identification to show where somebody lives for us to serve them. So we're partnering with World Relief and Carol Stream for new immigrants. We send them there to get registered, and if they tell us that they're in our service area, they're welcome to come for our services. So, as Erin said, we're so grateful for our partnership with this church. You've been so kind and so generous in supporting our neighbours. The frequent donations that Erin reaches out with, the Fire and Ice, that was so much fun. And you just mentioned the Giving Challenge. So we really are together. I think all the different community organizations together make a real difference in our community. So thank you so much for your support. We are grateful.
Thank you so much for that presentation. That really shines a light on the needs of our community. And I feel so fortunate to know all of these partners and to be working with each one of your organizations to tangibly serve not only our Christian neighbors, but our neighbors as a whole and the community as a whole. Because it's so very important and the need is on the rise, as Catherine mentioned. So I would love to start our discussion. Again, we're going to have room for questions, but if there is a question that comes to mind while we are talking about the needs of our communities and how we serve our neighbors, please just raise your hand and I could call on you. My first question for our guests, and Catherine touched on this a bit, but how have the needs of our community changed in the last 4 years? Have we seen an increase in food insecurity, housing crisis issues, insecurity, or the need for extra tutoring programs, after school programs?
Yeah, I'll let you ladies answer a little more, but the immediate things that come to my mind is, post-COVID, we have so many families who have additional needs than they did before COVID. There's still a lot of families that we see that are recovering from that, as well as you mentioned, all of the immigration and all the people coming here. Like, both of those two things have been on the rise in the past 4 years.
Personally, like I said before, I've been there only for a year in 2 months, and before that I was in Australia. But during the year that I've been with Outreach, I noticed that yes, there is an increase of needs regarding housing and food. And the grants that we received are not enough for the amount of people that come with the needs of a place to live. Not just that, but unfortunately, now we have also the immigrants that are coming into the country, and the grants are directed now toward them. And then we have a community here that have been longer and are not being taken care anymore. So, yes, there is a huge need regarding housing and food towards the community.
So I mentioned some of the increase in numbers that we're seeing, and we know that we're just scratching the surface. I think people think of DuPage County, well, it is one of the wealthiest counties, but there's a huge amount of need even in DuPage County. You mentioned the pandemic, and during pandemic, SNAP, our food stamp benefits were increased for most of our families who were on SNAP. They disappeared in March of last year, and it went back to pre-pandemic levels. So I had a senior come. Again, we see a lot of people coming, and I think that's something for us always to keep in mind, that we think that we are so far from needing this type of help. But I see so many people coming, often in tears, saying, I never ever thought I'd need to come for help like this. And this was a woman whose SNAP benefits had been reduced to $35 a month. And you think, well, what can a senior do with $35 a month? Very, very little. Another thing that we're seeing is people really struggling with paying their utility bills. So we do have an emergency assistance program where we can assist families up to twice a year with essential services. And that's where they bring their final disconnection notice and we pay an amount towards it. So we can pay up to $300, but we're seeing bills of $2,000 and more, people's water bills, electric bills. And it really just points to people being in crisis. When people are living in crisis, they just have to ignore many things and focus on an immediate need until something slams them in the face, which is your water is going to get cut off. And in line with our idea of dignity, obviously families cannot live with dignity without running water, without electricity, without their gas, without being able to pay their sewer bill. So we're also seeing just huge bills in terms of people just facing crises like that. So.
One of the things that comes to mind is when you hear about these things we just heard here, these specifics, utility issues, food issues, things like that. There's the flip side of it. There's all the emotional stuff that then is going on in this family that's struggling with all of this. Parents are working more. They're there less for their kids. The kids are needing those role models. So we had to think about all the emotional side of things too that come with all of this and how that's impacting a family. And that's us at DuCap. That's really what I mentioned, those positive experiences earlier. It's kids are going through you don't know what in these situations, and one positive thing that we're able to do, like help them with the tutoring or any of those sorts of things, be there so that they have positive role models. That's the stuff that makes a difference to get them through this stuff. Like, yeah, we can pay their utility bill, we can get them some food, but how are we taking care of their emotions too? And how are we making sure that if their family is going through something terrible, they're able to see some other positive role models to get them to see some different things. So those are some things that tie into.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. I forgot to mention, now that you're talking about the emotional part, well, we do have also an increase of clients coming with the need of seeing a counselor, a therapist, and that's one of the things that I'm actually really happy that Outreach was able to open a counseling center here in near Villa Park, so it's in Oakbrook Terrace, and we have a therapist, actually 2 counselors, 1 therapist, and we do take Medicare, Medicaid, which is something that other organizations unfortunately cannot provide to the clients. So this is good. And another thing that we're mentioning regarding housing is increasingly, we see that most of the shelters that are offered in the area continually tell us that they're overflow, there are too many, there's no space. So we have people living on the streets and during this weather, which is really, really worrisome. Sometimes even staying in the police department or in the libraries, public libraries, is denied to them. So this, I just, sometimes I feel like, what can we do to help them?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're working on, working together, right? Is discerning the needs of our neighbors and tangibly serving them together. So thank you, ladies, so much for all of this really important, really moving, impactful information. I would like to close with an opportunity for our congregants to ask questions for our panelists. Is there anyone who has any questions or? No? Yes, Hector. Okay.
Does that,
we're seeing a lot of the former that you mentioned, especially here in Villa Park. A lot of not two-parent families, and a lot of many families living together in one house. You know, aunts, uncles, grandparents, those sorts of things. Is what I believe we're seeing a bunch of here in Villa Park, and in the other suburbs we serve with DuCap I didn't mention was Glendale Heights, Bensonville, and Wheaton, as well as Romeoville and Bolingbrook. And I know in our Bensonville community, a lot of it is multiple families living in one apartment complex.
I do agree with her. I personally see a lot of a single mother with 3, 4, even 5 children, which is, and sometimes not even with work, no job. So, and what I find really worrisome is that most of these programs, they come with a if. So do you have future ability to pay? For example, with rental assistance. And most of them are like, you know, they don't have a job, or they have jobs that are seasonal, and so they don't have the ability to pay in the future. So, but yes, again, yes, single mothers, lots of children, and not ability to take care of themselves, really.
Thank you. I think the same, you know, we're seeing just people just trying to find anywhere to live. So a lot of people living at the same address. We're seeing, I think, just exhausted people, exhausted human beings. I don't think we can even understand the journey that they had to make to get here, and then they're getting here and being treated just so awfully. So it's, I mean, there's a DuPage Hunger Network, so that's where a lot of us in the kind of food network get together periodically to talk about, well, how can we help? And so there's a ton of people out there trying to do the right thing to help people, which really is very encouraging. But for me, the shock is just sometimes how people are showing up, like literally with nothing. So I mentioned the man with no socks and flip-flops in that cold weather. A few weeks ago, we had a woman heavily pregnant, about to give birth, and again, she showed up with nothing. And we know that she must have made the most shocking journey to get here. So again, we're so grateful to be able to offer her diapers and clothes. And one of the things we're trying to do, again, just with this, like just connecting, is we're very much essential services, right? We're offering food and clothes and diapers. I'm the only employee at the Outreach House. Everyone else is a volunteer. So what we're trying to do is invite other nonprofits who can provide caseworkers or other services. Though DuPage, Access DuPage comes quite frequently to do outreach to our guests. How do you get health care without health insurance? Glenbard Early Education Collaborative, they're coming, parents as teachers, reaching out to provide support to parents with young children, including children of new immigrants. So we're doing our best to kind of provide more wraparound services. So again, as you mentioned, not duplicating efforts, but really just trying to connect people who are doing the right things to give as much wraparound support as we can.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us this afternoon, morning and afternoon, right? This has been so informative, and I am so blessed to know every single one of you, and thank you so much for all of the hard work you're doing in the community. Thank you for giving us some ideas of how we can help you tangibly with your organizations, and please continue to reach out to us whenever you feel the need or are in need. So let's give all of our guests a warm welcome, and thank you guys so much. Thank you.